2 months after the accident, as the snow gradually melted, the search and rescue team spent an entire month recovering 4 bodies located 75 meters from the cedar tree. Initially, the rescue team found a pair of black cotton sports pants and a light brown sweater near the cedar tree. They believed the remaining victims might be nearby. After digging 3.5 meters deep, the rescue team discovered a pile of clothes and several cut branches. According to the investigation, these clothes belonged to the first 2 victims who froze to death under the cedar tree. Later, in a creek about 20 meters from the snow pit, investigators detected bodies buried under the snow using rescue equipment. Eventually, the search team unearthed the remains of the last 4 victims, located 4 meters away from the snow pit. The 4 victims were Lyudmila Dubinina, 21 years old, Alexander Kolovatov, 25 years old, Nikolai Thibault Brignol, 24 years old, and Semyon Zolotaryov, 38 years old. Based on the external appearance of the bodies, it was initially assumed that they had no visible injuries, and their cause of death was presumed to be similar to that of the first 5 victims. Given the location of the snow pit, it was speculated that these 4 individuals had been seeking shelter, heading downhill, and accidentally fell into the ravine near the creek, either dying upon impact or succumbing to the extreme cold. Furthermore, based on their clothing, it was even possible to infer the order in which the team members perished. Lyudmila Dubinina was found wearing a brown sweater belonging to Yuri Krivonischenko, one of the first victims who froze to death under the cedar tree. This suggests that after the initial 2 deaths, the group split into 2 smaller factions, one attempting to return to the tent, and the other heading toward the foot of the mountain, possibly to seek help from locals. Unfortunately, neither group survived the brutal cold. However, after the 4 bodies were taken to the hospital for autopsy, chilling and inexplicable findings emerged, rendering all prior assumptions about the accident meaningless. Their deaths were entirely different from those of the first 5 victims, exhibiting several unusual anomalies. 1. None of the 4 died from hypothermia. Instead, they suffered from fatal injuries. 2. Lyudmila Dubinina and Semyon Zolotaryov had all their ribs broken, with the fractures puncturing their hearts and lungs. The severity of these injuries was comparable to a direct collision with a car moving at 80 kilometers per hour. 3rd, Nikolai Thibault Brignol's skull was completely shattered and severely deformed. 4th, Alexander Kolovatov's neck was broken. 5. While these injuries could be explained by a severe fall, avalanche, or impact, Dubinina's facial tissue, including her nasal bridge, lips, and tongue, was missing, while Zolotaryov had lost both of his eyeballs. The missing body parts were never recovered. 6. This group wore more clothing than the previous 5 victims, but strangely, their clothes contained high levels of radiation. With these bizarre injuries found on the last 4 victims, it became evident that their deaths were far more complex than initially presumed. Naturally, these anomalies drew significant attention, prompting police intervention in the investigation. They first examined the victims' bodies and clothing, ruling out any traces of animal attacks. Authorities initially suspected the local Mansi people, as they were known to remove body parts from deceased individuals as part of their hunting traditions. However, this theory was quickly dismissed due to a lack of supporting evidence. On May 28, 1959, forensic experts released an official report regarding the abnormalities found on Dubinina and Zolotaryov's bodies. The characteristics of the injuries on the bodies of Lyudmila Dubinina and Semyon Zolotaryov: multiple rib fractures, symmetrical on both sides for Dubinina and unilateral for Zolotaryov, along with internal bleeding in the heart and chest cavity, indicate that these injuries occurred while they were still alive. Moreover, these injuries were inflicted by an immense force, similar to what was observed on the body of Nikolai Thibault Brignol. These wounds lack any external damage to the soft tissues of the chest, closely resembling injuries caused by the shock wave of an explosion. When subjected to shock waves, the human body's soft tissues, which are highly elastic, sustain minimal damage. In contrast, bones, being rigid and brittle, fracture easily. This suggests that the 4 victims were exposed to an extreme force. However, the mystery deepened further when the rescue team discovered the cameras carried by the hikers, making the already eerie case even more baffling. According to the only survivor, Yuri Yudin, who had turned back due to illness on the first day, the hiking team had a total of 5 cameras. The search and rescue team found 4 of them inside the tent and 1 on Semyon Zolotaryov's body. Yudin recalled that the cameras were carried by Nikolai Thibault-Brignol, Semyon Zolotaryov, Yuri Krivonishenko, and Rustem Slobodin, though he couldn't remember the 5th person. This meant that no one had retrieved the cameras from the scene post-mortem. Beyond the number of cameras, authorities were far more intrigued by their contents, especially the one found on Zolotaryov, as it was the only camera he held onto in his final moments. Why did he prioritize taking his camera while fleeing? Did he sense that something was about to happen? Unfortunately, after examination, police concluded that the film inside Zolotaryov's camera had been damaged. According to investigators present at the scene when his body was discovered, one of his hands was still gripping the camera, while the other held a notebook. But strangely, its pages were blank. This raised a critical question. What had Zolotaryov seen before his death? Aside from his camera, another camera found inside the tent also caught the attention of investigators. It belonged to Yuri Krivonishenko and contained 34 photographs. The first 33 photos were normal, showing the team in various moments of their journey. They depicted extremely harsh weather conditions, explaining why the team deviated from their original route and camped on the Mountain of the Dead. However, photo number 34 was vastly different from the others. On the night of the incident, other hiking groups in the Ural Mountains reported seeing mysterious orange lights in the sky. Local residents confirmed that such phenomena had occurred before. Some believed they were UFOs, while others speculated they were secret weapons or even alien entities. To many, photo 34 was proof of supernatural involvement. Tragically, this photo was not intentionally captured, but was the result of a laboratory accident during analysis. In reality, Krivonishenko had accidentally opened the camera's shutter. Unlike modern cameras, those from the 1950s required the shutter to remain closed when not in use. In other words, someone had attempted to capture something significant, but the photo was never properly taken. Had it been, we might have uncovered the true culprit behind the tragedy. In the 1990s, a British author first revealed some details in a book titled Dyatlov Pass, suggesting that the real clues lay in Zolotaryov's camera. A member of the original rescue team allegedly claimed that authorities had declared the film inside his camera as completely damaged because the leadership believed its contents were troubling and did not contribute to solving the case. But was this the truth? Some of the surviving photos, despite being taken at night, appeared to capture strange, glowing objects in the sky. 3 images, Photo 1, Photo 8, and Photo 11, were particularly striking. Photo 1 showed a massive glowing orb in the upper left corner. Photo 8 depicted an unidentified luminous object among the trees. Investigators later discovered burn marks on treetops in the area. Photo 11 resembled a burning aircraft. While these images seemed unrelated, they all suggested the presence of a mysterious light-emitting object whose altitude changed dramatically over time. By February and March, many locals also reported witnessing similar phenomena. However, when the police reported these orange objects to higher authorities, they were abruptly ordered to cease the investigation. In August 1959, the Soviet government officially closed the case, concluding that the hikers had succumbed to an unknown natural force. The case was labeled a mere hiking accident. Yet, this explanation failed to convince the victims' families and the public, fueling relentless efforts to uncover the hidden truth behind Dyatlov Pass. More than 60 years have passed since the tragedy at Dyatlov Pass. Yet, to this day, there is still no explanation convincing enough to satisfy everyone. There are several reasons why this case remains an unsolved mystery. First, the incident took place in a remote, snow-covered area with no inhabitants. The bodies were discovered too late, making evidence collection difficult. There were no direct witnesses, and the remaining evidence had been altered by time and the harsh environment. Second, the clues related to the case are both scarce and fragmented, making it extremely difficult to reconstruct the sequence of events. Furthermore, official records may have been buried along with the collapse of the Soviet Union, shrouding the case in even deeper mystery. This very enigma has given rise to countless theories regarding the cause of the expedition members' deaths. Below are some of the most popular perspectives today. 1. Murder. According to this theory, the hiking team was pursued and killed in the forest, the snow pit, and other locations. Regarding the motive, some believe the murders were orchestrated by ruthless KGB or CIA agents, while others suggest the Mansi hunters killed them for trespassing into a sacred area in their culture. Some even speculate that the hikers may have turned on each other, with the last surviving member committing suicide, making Semyon Zolotaryov the prime suspect. 2. Wild animals or an unknown creature. This theory proposes that the destruction of the campsite was caused by wild wolves or bears. Some even believe that an unknown local creature, referred to as the Yeti, similar to Bigfoot, was the true killer of the group members. 3. UFOs and aliens. Unexplained mysteries often attract theories involving extraterrestrial beings, and the Dyatlov Pass incident is no exception. The mysterious orange object spotted in the sky has become the primary evidence supporting claims of alien involvement. 4. Accident. Some skeptics dismiss supernatural forces and suggest that the group may have encountered a small avalanche or a fire inside the tent, forcing them to flee and ultimately perish in the freezing cold. There is also speculation that Soviet officials had been testing a secret weapon in the area, and the hikers were unfortunate casualties of shock waves caused by the experiment. 5. Rare natural phenomena. Certain theories propose that rare natural occurrences, such as ball lightning, infrasound waves, or even gravitational field fluctuations, may have led to the group's mysterious deaths. However, all these theories remain purely speculative, and many questions surrounding the Dyatlov Pass tragedy remain unanswered. To better understand the incident, the area where it occurred can be divided into 3 main locations: the tent site, the cedar tree, and the snow pit. The victims were also found in 3 separate groups. The first group consisted of 2 people who froze to death under the cedar tree. The second group included 3 individuals who died on their way back to the tent, some with injuries on their bodies. The third group of 4 was discovered near the snow pit with severe trauma. These strange arrangements only add to the mystery, fueling endless speculation about what truly happened that fateful night. The key questions we need to answer. To uncover the truth behind the Dyatlov Pass incident, we must analyze and answer the following crucial questions. Why did the entire group leave the tent in such a hurry? Why did they split into smaller groups? What caused the injuries on the second and third groups? Why did they leave the tent? From the beginning, investigators speculated that the group fled due to an avalanche, cutting their way out of the tent in haste, so quickly that they didn't even have time to put on warm clothing, shoes, or hats. But is this true? By comparing two photographs taken at the scene, we can observe that the height of the trekking poles remains nearly the same in both images. This indicates that more than 20 days after the hikers went missing, there was no significant snowfall. Only a small amount of snow covered the tent. Additionally, there were no signs of an avalanche on the night of the incident, and the snow accumulation at the tent site serves as solid evidence against this theory. Aside from the vertically cut slits marked in blue, there were also some horizontal cuts marked in red. These two different types of cuts suggest the following scenario. A team member, awakened by something outside the tent, made a horizontal cut at eye level while sitting to observe the situation. Upon realizing the severity of the threat, the group quickly decided to cut the tent vertically for a faster escape. But what did they see? Before answering this, we can rule out the possibility of them seeing predators, like bears or wolves. If people see a hungry predator outside their tent, their instinct would not be to cut it open and rush out, but rather to defend themselves. However, there is one type of threat that could leave them with no time to react: other humans. From this perspective, the murder theory gains credibility. The hikers may have heard strange noises outside, opened the tent, and discovered they were surrounded. In a state of panic, they were forced to flee under intense pursuit. This urgency is evident from the fact that many of them did not have enough clothing to stay warm. However, a crucial detail is that no footprints or evidence of other people were found at the scene. If a murderer was truly present, they might have erased their tracks to conceal their presence. Alternatively, what the hikers saw may not have been a person, but rather a mysterious phenomenon. A likely candidate is the orange object mentioned in reports. If so, it must have posed an extreme threat to their lives, as otherwise the group would not have fled so frantically under such harsh conditions. But what was this orange object? A secret Soviet military weapon, a rare natural occurrence like ball lightning. The mystery remains unsolved. Regardless of whether it was a Soviet secret weapon or an explosion caused by ball lightning, one unexplained fact remains. The hikers traveled an unusually long distance from their tent. When the search team found the campsite, all equipment and food inside the tent were neatly placed, showing no signs of damage. This suggests that there was no explosion or fire in the area. At a distance of 2,000 meters, a normal person would need about 30 minutes to walk that far on a city street. But for the hikers, who lacked proper shoes and warm clothing, moving in the dark and in temperatures as low as -20 to -30 degrees Celsius, it would have taken significantly longer. Why did they travel such a long distance under these conditions instead of seeking shelter nearby? Imagine, what could have terrified the group so much that they fled in panic without disturbing any of the objects inside the tent? One possible answer is infrasound waves, or a type of toxic gas. If infrasound was the cause, an English researcher once suggested that infrasound waves were responsible for the incident. Infrasound is a type of low-frequency sound wave that can cause fear, nausea, suffocation, and other harmful effects. However, infrasound is not lethal to humans, and individuals react differently to it. It is unlikely that all 9 members of the group would have been affected simultaneously in the exact same way. Another possibility is toxic gas, which may be the real cause of the incident. However, before analyzing this theory further, we must answer the next question in the following discussion. Why did the group split into smaller groups? To answer this, we need to trace the hikers' movements at Dyatlov Pass. Based on the footprints found, all 9 members left the tent at the same time. The footprints were stable and evenly spaced, suggesting that none of them were injured at that moment. From this, we can infer that they all walked together into the forest. By the time they reached the cedar tree, the entire group was still together. They lit a fire for warmth, until the first 2 members succumbed to the cold. From the evidence found at the scene, it is likely that this duo perished first, as their bodies were found lying side by side, almost completely stripped of clothing. Their clothes were later discovered on the bodies of the 4 individuals found in the snow pit. This directly indicates that the group split up after the deaths of Yuri Krivonishenko, 24, and Yuri Doroshenko, 22. After stripping the clothes from the first 2 victims, the remaining members of the group decided to search for a new, safer shelter. They continued moving until they found a snow pit, a more enclosed space that could provide some protection against the freezing winds and help them survive. However, at that point, they faced a severe shortage of food and warm clothing. As a result, the remaining members decided to split up. 3 of them attempted to return to the forest, seemingly trying to make their way back to the tent, while the other 4 chose to stay behind, ultimately perishing in a stream outside the snow pit. However, this theory has been met with much skepticism. On such a freezing night, with local weather reports recording temperatures as low as -30 degrees Celsius, why did they not choose to conserve energy and wait for daylight in the snow pit rather than venturing out to their deaths? Another theory suggests that after the first 2 members died, the remaining 7 discussed and divided their actions. The 3 who attempted to return to the tent may have been trying to retrieve supplies, while the group of 4 intended to descend the mountain in search of help. In fact, according to the investigation report, after taking the clothes from the 2 deceased members, the remaining 7 individuals had some degree of cold resistance. If not for some unforeseen incidents, they would not have succumbed to hypothermia so easily. Among them, only Nikolai Thibault Brignol and Semyon Zolotaryov were found wearing shoes, while the rest were only wearing socks. Under these circumstances, separating to seek help seemed like a reasonable decision. However, this also significantly reduced their chances of survival. So, what really happened that night? This remains one of the blind spots in the Dyatlov Pass Incident. Many researchers believe that a single event forced the entire group to leave their tent, initially causing only minor injuries. Then a second event occurred, which ultimately led to the group's split and the severe injuries that followed. But what was this second event? To answer that, we must consider another critical question. Where did the injuries of the remaining group members come from? Aside from the first 2 victims who died of hypothermia, the other 7 suffered varying degrees of trauma. 3 sustained minor injuries, while the other 4 suffered severe and even fatal wounds. This disparity makes it unlikely that they were attacked by outsiders, as a killer would have had no reason to spare the 3 survivors, especially considering that they were barefoot and less mobile in the snow. This leads to another possibility. Could internal conflict have broken out among the group, resulting in violence? Perhaps the 3 survivors overpowered the other 4. However, since no significant conflicts among the 9 members were known, this theory lacks a solid basis. In reality, the official Soviet report hinted at the truth, concluding the case as an instance of an unknown compelling force. This means they died from a powerful impact, which aligns with the autopsy findings. As for this compelling force, many have speculated, based on the Soviet authorities' vague and cautious handling of the case, that it may have been related to secret weapons testing. Some even go further, suggesting that the Dyatlov Pass incident was an entirely man-made cover-up designed to conceal something much bigger. In this final part of the Dyatlov Pass mystery, let's explore the lingering questions and unresolved enigmas surrounding the 4 individuals found near the snow pit. Why was Lyudmila Dubinina's tongue missing, while Semyon Zolotaryov had lost both of his eyeballs? And why were these missing body parts never recovered? This question often evokes eerie speculation, but in reality it may be the easiest to explain. Before answering, we must disregard the frequently cited phrase, "the tongue was ripped out," which appears in many online discussions about the Dyatlov Pass case. In fact, in Dubinina's initial autopsy report, there was only one phrase related to her tongue. The tongue is absent. Meanwhile, all other injuries on her body were meticulously recorded and explained, suggesting that forensic examiners were not surprised by the missing tongue, especially given that the body had been buried in the snow for 3 months. A plausible explanation is that Dubinina's body was submerged in running water for an extended period. In such extremely cold conditions, her tongue could have frozen, shattered, and been carried away by the current. An entirely possible scenario. This explanation could also account for Zolotaryov's missing eyeballs. Why did the clothing of the 4 victims contain high levels of radiation? A total of 3 pieces of clothing at the scene were found to have abnormally high radiation levels. A brown wool sweater found on Dubinina's body, 9,900 decays per minute per 150 square centimeters. Pants belonging to Alexander Kolovatov, 5,000 decays per minute per 150 square centimeters. A woolen belt from Alexander Kolovatov, 5,600 decays per minute per 150 square centimeters. These readings were 2 to 3 times higher than what would typically be considered unusual. Interestingly, the sweater found on Dubinina actually belonged to Yuri Krivonishenko, one of the first 2 victims. The northern Ural Mountains were previously the site of a nuclear waste explosion. The Kishtim disaster, a nuclear plant leak in the Soviet Union in the 1950s, late 1950s, ranked as the 3rd most serious nuclear disaster in history after the Fukushima accident in Japan and the Chernobyl disaster in Pripyat, Ukraine. Considering the spread of radioactive fallout, contamination of the victims' clothing cannot be ruled out. During the investigation, authorities also discovered that both Yuri Krivonishenko and Alexander Kolovatov had worked in nuclear power plants. It is possible that the radiation traces originated from them. Additionally, from the very beginning, there was one individual who stood out among the group of 9 climbers, Semyon Zolotaryov. While the rest were university students from the Ural Polytechnic Institute in their 20s, Zolotaryov was a 38-year-old instructor at a tourism training center. Moreover, there are many strange details about Zolotaryov. When joining the climbing team, he did not use his real name, but instead used the alias Sasha. He carried a large amount of cash and documents in his backpack. He had tattoos on his body, which was very rare in the Soviet Union at that time. Among them was the word Der-Muzawaya, in Cyrillic Der-Muazwa, which does not exist in any known natural language. He participated in the Eastern Front, Soviet-German War, and survived, even though the survival rate of soldiers from his unit was only 3%. Because of these reasons, the truth about this 38-year-old man remains a mystery, and numerous speculations about him have spread rapidly. The most famous theory comes from the book Dyatlov Pass by Russian writer Alexei Rakitan. In his book, he suggested that 3 KGB agents had disguised themselves as members of the hiking team. Their real mission in the Ural Mountains was to make contact with CIA operatives, while the hiking trip was merely a cover for their true identities. However, their contact with the Americans failed, leading the CIA to use violent means to eliminate the entire hiking team. The Soviet Union, in turn, took extensive measures to manipulate the crime scene, hiding the involvement of both the KGB and the CIA. These included fabricating the radioactive clothing as a false lead. Some crucial pieces of evidence went missing, making the incident appear as an unsolvable mystery, thereby silencing public speculation and preventing outsiders from uncovering the truth. This theory, as presented in the book, caused a major stir in Russia, as it aligned perfectly with public curiosity about the incident. However, many still believe that this speculation is just as unfounded as theories blaming UFOs for the Dyatlov Pass incident. In reality, even the author of Dyatlov Pass later admitted that the Dyatlov Pass event is the most mysterious and bizarre case he has ever encountered. While writing the book, Alexei Rakitan completely overturned his own carefully crafted conclusions multiple times. He realized that no matter how he analyzed the case, there would always be one or two inexplicable mysteries left. Ultimately, after gathering and examining vast amounts of information and theories, Rakitan did his best to propose an explanation he found most reasonable, though he admitted that his conclusions could still be far from the actual events. The story of Dyatlov Pass remains an unsolved enigma. 9 hikers perished under strange and chilling circumstances, leaving behind countless theories, but no definitive answers. Will the truth forever remain buried beneath the cold snow? What do you think really happened? Leave your thoughts in the comments below. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to the channel so you won't miss out on more mysterious stories. See you in the next video.